and welcome to this live online Shout Learning event. We are so happy that you're with us today. We have assembled a great number of experts who are going to be sharing their passion and their knowledge with you throughout the day, and we hope that it will inspire you to share your questions and your ideas with us throughout the day. And that's why we do these sessions live at Shout Learning. We want to interact with all of you. We want to hear your questions. We want to know what you think. So to that end, we hope you'll go ahead and use the chat area on the left side of the screen, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself. You can, even though it says submit question, we welcome comments as well, resources, thoughts, anything you wish to share with us that relates to our event today. So please feel free to jump in and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. While you do that, many of you have already posted introductions to the discussion forum, and I wanted to go ahead and just take a look at a few of those that have come in on the Shout Conference website. I can see that we have Carmen joining us, who's a principal of a school district in Romania, and they have planted trees together and used the tree banding toolkit that's part of the Shout Learning project to talk about how they can and actually do something in terms of taking care of nature around us. That's one way people can value the land, which is our theme for today's event. So thank you, Carmen in Romania, for introducing yourself. I can see that Catherine, one of our Shout Learning partners, is welcoming us all from Taking It Global in the chat area. I'm looking for other introductions from all of you. John Cunningham logged in today and introduced himself in the forum. He's an environmental science teacher in Brooklyn, New York, where I am in New York. And he says, the preservation of experiences and sentiments I encounter in fieldwork amounts to encouragement and invitation for my students. So he's hoping to pick up some ideas about how to interview and work with families, one of the themes we'll be talking about throughout today as well. So keep your eyes out for your colleagues, like the ones we've just mentioned, including others like Dan Ibo joining us from Nigeria today, and so many others from around the world. So thank you. A quick note for those of you who are not familiar with Shout, it's a partnership of the Smithsonian, Microsoft Partners in Learning, and Taking It Global. And we welcome all of our partners who are logged in today, we know that they're very happy to see you as well. As I mentioned a few moments before we began, we are closed captioning today's event, and you'll see those captions appearing live in real time on the screen below the slide area. So we hope you find that a useful service. We also wanted to mention that during the event today and even after today's event, you can continue to stay in touch with us in a variety of ways, including following the Shout Learning Twitter feed. And if you mark your tweets with the hashtag Shout Learning, you'll be keeping us in the loop as well. So we hope and encourage you to do that. Also, we're on Facebook, and you can find us at facebook.com/shoutlearning. And we're doing updates there throughout the day, but we're also using that as a great way to connect with all of you as we go along throughout this great Shout Learning project. I'll be back at the end as well to give you a few tidbits and ideas about how you can continue the learning that we hope will happen here with Genevieve Annette, our host for this first session. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. And one last thing I wanted to mention before we start the main event is that our colleague Dan is logged in as our remote scribe from Kent in the United Kingdom today, and he is going to be virtually illustrating the session, that is taking notes in a graphical format. And we'll go ahead and share that drawing with all of you after today's session, and if we have some time during the session as well. But that'll become a lasting takeaway of your experience with all of us today. So thanks, Dan, for being on hand live to capture what you're hearing as we go along. So it gives me great pleasure, actually, to introduce this first session, which is really going to tackle this question, this theme for today. What does value the land actually mean? What does it mean to you? And what does it mean to American Indian peoples today? And that's going to be where we're going to begin. And our speakers today come from the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. I'll let them say a little bit more about what they do and at the museum, but we're so glad they're with us. And I'm going to leave you with a question as we turn the floor over to them, which is, what does it mean to you to value the land? So I'll put that question up on the screen, and as you go ahead and tell us what it means to you, let's turn to Genevieve Annette.
Great, thank you very much. Well, first of all, we both wanted to say how pleased we are to be able to participate in this session. It was a very timely invitation to us because we have, for the past many months, have been working on developing an educational website that looks at environmental issues within Native American communities. So it was a good opportunity for us to help people learn a little bit more about the work that we have been doing. Let me see if I can get our first slide up here. The website that we have been working on is called American Indian Responses to Environmental Challenges. And we are going to give you an opportunity to kind of get a sneak preview of certain parts of that website. It launches in a few weeks. It goes live in a few weeks, but we're fortunate enough to have the opportunity today to share some of the components of that with you, and I'll let Ed get to that in a minute. But as the question was posed just a moment ago about what does it mean to value the land, that really, I think, is a very good question to start with. As Ed and I sat down to talk about how we were going to approach this conference session, that was the question that we sort of kept in the forefront of our minds the whole time, of what does it really mean to value the land. And we were looking at how environmental issues are so often intertwined with cultural preservation in Native American communities. Oftentimes, American Indian people are stereotypically seen as the first environmentalists, or that we all love Mother Earth, those types of things. And it's a little bit more involved than that. And so we're hoping that today we can help people to understand the ways that environmental issues and cultural preservation and cultural sustainability are important. On our first slide, where we had the subtitle of Working for a Sustainable Future, I just wanted to throw in a quick note to mention that when we're talking about a sustainable future, we aren't just talking about sustainable environmental future. We're talking about sustainable cultural future as well. So those are two very important points that we hope everyone will keep in mind today as we're going through our presentation. So I'm going to pass it over to Ed for a minute to give him a chance to sort of give you a quick introduction to what our website is, a little beyond what I've said, and the specific communities that we worked with for the website, and then we can move on from there to get into a little bit more detail. So I'll pass it over to Ed.
Thanks, Genevieve. Hi, everyone, from here in sunny and hot Washington, D.C. today. We really want to thank you for joining us on this presentation and for spending some of your time with us. I am going to talk about our website, that we're very excited about it. Just a little bit of background first is that it's a website that's targeted for middle school students, middle school age, and maybe younger high school age students. We feel that it's going to be able to be used in science classes, various types of social studies classes, environmental studies, and as enrichment. It's designed to address the national standards of learning here in the United States. And so basically what it does is to tell the stories of how 4 very different American Indian communities are dealing with an environmental issue in the lands where they've lived for thousands of years. So just to kind of set a little of that scene, imagine yourself and your ancestors going back countless generations, living in the same area for thousands of years. Today, most of us spend our time indoors, don't we? We don't spend a lot of time outside in the environment, breathing the air, noticing the plants and animals, all the trees and the waters. And when your people live in a place for that long, you know your environment intimately. You recognize when there's a problem. You know when things aren't right. So to illustrate some of these environmental problems that these Indian communities are dealing with today, we chose 4 very different communities. And I'm going to show you a little bit of what they're dealing with on our first our homepage for our environmental website. Now, these are very different communities from different geographic locations. They have very different languages and cultures, and they're different, dealing with different kinds of environmental issues. One of these communities is the Akwesasne Mohawk. They're located in the upper northeastern part of the United States and in Canada, across the border. They are dealing with an issue that has to do with the black ash trees and an invasive species of insect that is challenging the survival of those trees, and a tree that's very important to their culture. They're known as basket makers in their traditions, and this black ash tree is the tree that they use for basket making, and it's being challenged today, so we'll talk more about that. The next community that we look at is the Campo Kumeyaay Nation. The Kumeyaay people are from the far southwestern part of the United States in Southern California. Traditionally, their lands also reach down into what is now Mexico. This is, as you can probably tell from this photograph that's here, this is very dry and arid kind of land. And water is a very, very important resource there. Well, the water availability has been very challenged, and the Campo Kumeyaay Nation have had to take steps to address that issue. Moving on, we have the Leech Lake Ojibwe. They're from the Great Lakes region of the United States, and also there are lots of Ojibwe communities that stretch up into Canada as well. The particular community that we're looking at, the Leech Lake Band, are from what's now the state of Minnesota. And the issue that they're dealing with environmentally is the wild rice. Wild rice is a plant that's very dependent on good quality water, and it's very sensitive to changes in the environment. Rice is extremely important to their traditional culture and their history, and the Ojibwe people are having to deal with challenges to wild rice. And finally, our fourth community comes from the far northwest of the United States. The Lummi Nation are located in what's now Washington State. This is, as you can tell, a very marine type of environment. It's the Puget Sound, and it's an area that the salmon, various species of salmon, have migrated into and out of since time immemorial. The Lummi have a very close connection to that animal, and salmon are threatened today. Some species are even facing extinction. And so the Lummi are dealing with the threats to salmon. So those are the four different communities that we're highlighting in this website and their stories. And I'm going to turn it back over to Genevieve.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ed. So based on what Ed was just talking about and some of the things I mentioned earlier, I think that you can begin to get a sense of the idea that connections to the land are very complex. Now, this holds true for any group of people from any part of the world, and we're just speaking specifically about these four Native American communities, and in some instances it does stretch over to other American Indian communities as well, but we are talking about these four distinct communities today, just to make sure that everyone understands that this is not meant to be overgeneralized. So when we talk about connections to land being very complex, we can think about anybody who's participating could think about the place that they're from, and the resources that they have access to plays a big role in how we all define ourselves. And it's what makes us each unique and distinct. And I think Ed he painted a very nice picture in asking you to imagine earlier on what it would be like to be from one place for time immemorial. So the connections to the land have to do with our culture. It's what makes us unique. It's what makes us distinct from each other. But beyond that, in these four communities, economy is also a big connection to the land, whether it's about being able to harvest black ash trees to make baskets that you can sell to make a living, or to be able to harvest wild rice that can then be processed and sold for income for people within the tribe. There are economic connections to the land that these environmental problems are challenging as well, in addition to the challenges that they pose to the culture. A third component of the complex connection is always about the future. And for these four communities in particular, there one of their main concerns and one of the main reasons that they are working so hard to protect the environments where they live is about their future. It's about their cultural future. It's about their economic future. It's also about their children's future and wanting to make sure that their children and their children's children have a place that they can call home and that they feel connected to and that they understand the ways in which are, for them culturally, the best to interact with that place. So when you bring all of these three things together, you start to get a pretty good picture of what this website is helping, or what we're hoping you'll learn from this website. And when we think about the long histories of American Indian peoples, the environments where they live have been important to them in many ways, as we've both described. They've thrived on these lands, they respect these lands, and they've always worked to protect the environments that make their homelands. And in some cases, it's outside factors that are causing some of these problems. But what we'd like to do quickly here, if we can, is show you a brief video clip of one of the community members that we worked with from the Akwesasne Mohawk community, and she's talking a little bit about from the Mohawk people's perspective in their community, what it really means to respect and be connected to the land. So if we can watch this clip of Maxine Cole, who's a teacher from the Akwesasne Freedom School.
Honda is the words before all else. Those are the things that are said when you get up in the morning and, you wake up and you say, I'm still living, I still have life. And then you start to acknowledge all those things around us that have life too. And so it starts from from the people and then the ground up into the sky. And that's about giving thanks to all that the Creator has given us.
Great. So I think that Maxine does a nice job of, from the Mohawk people's perspective, of helping us to understand, why it's so important to show appreciation each day for the things that we have. And as Ed and I have both mentioned today, being good stewards of the environment remains important to American Indian people. It's not a new found respect for the environment, but they are trying to find new ways to show respect for that environment. We have one other video clip that we'd like to show you to kind of help illustrate that point. This is a video from the same community, Akwesasne Mohawk. Les Benedict is one of the people who works for the tribe in their environment division, and he was very helpful to us in learning about the problems that they're facing there. So if we can hear what Les has to say.
It's a long-term investment. The work that we do today will probably have a visible or a tangible impact maybe 15, 20 years, 50 years from now. It's like planting trees. If I plant a tree today, I won't see the benefit of it, but the next generation will see the benefit of the trees.
Great. So, as you hear what Les is talking about, that it's not about what we do today. It's not about what happens right now. It's about what happens in the future. And if we can provide today for something in the future, then that's a great benefit to everybody. So hopefully that these points are helping you to understand where we're headed with this. And we want to go into talking a little bit about some of the serious environmental problems that these four communities are facing. And the reason that we're showing you these are videos that are from the website, and if you were to be able to go click through the website, you'd be able to hear the voices and the perspectives of these community members that we spoke with. We spoke with environmentalists, scientists, tribal leaders, elders, artists, storytellers, children, all getting their perspective on these environmental problems that they're facing. So these are the videos that we're showing you. And we wanted to show another video clip to help you understand a little bit about when we talk about challenge, what it means from the perspective of these communities. So if we could pull up the clip from the Campo Kumeyaay Nation talking about the challenge that they're facing. This is just an example for you to understand as we move forward with our specific examples, for you to understand a little bit about how these 4 communities are addressing these problems or these challenges. So if we could start that video, that would be great.
We're about a mile east of the Campo Reservation. It's a good example of what happens when you have cattle grazing for over 100 years in an area. One of the plants you see here is the sage, is the Great Basin sage. Sage is a disturbed area plant. The only way for sage to come in and really dominate an area is if it's continually disturbed. This is Campo Creek, and at one time it had a fully developed riparian habitat, and there were willow trees that filled up the center, willows and cottonwoods, and then along the sides then were the oaks, and the oaks would cover this whole valley here.
So you get a little bit of a sense of, at least with Campo, the broad scope of the problem, that it's not just one simple fix, that there are many steps and many aspects to the challenges that they're facing. I'd like to quickly show you one more video clip about how we address the idea of strategies. And when we say strategy, we're talking about the strategies that are used to address the specific environmental challenge. So this is a short clip from the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. We spoke with Steve Smith, who's a biology and chemistry instructor at the Leech Lake Tribal College, and he was helping to explain to us a little bit about some of the strategies that they're taking on there at Leech Lake to address their environmental, the challenges they're facing with their wild rice in Minnesota there. So if we could hear what Steve Smith has to say.
The Leech Lake Tribal College is a 2-year school. We have a new AS degree, Associate Science degree in natural science. And we see that degree as being able to prepare students for work in natural resource protection fields. In all our courses, we try to incorporate the local culture, the Anishinaabe culture. And we try to give students an understanding of how we can look at local issues and local environmental concerns and problems using both Western science and a native traditional ecological knowledge perspective. So we hope that through this course we give students a pretty full understanding of wild rice and not only the scientific angle but the cultural and historical angle, and talk about threats also and what the future is for wild rice.
Great. So as we move forward and looking at the four examples of the kinds of challenges that these communities are facing, one is pretty obvious. It's one that we've talked about and that you heard both of the gentlemen in these 2 clips talk about, and that's endangered cultural traditions. And there are many ways that you could strategize to work towards the problem of cultural traditions that are endangered. One strategy that was used by all 4 of the communities that we worked with is educating the community. And when we say the community, we don't just mean their local tribal community, but also working to educate the larger community where they live, or in some cases even beyond. So the 2 photographs that you see here are photographs of wild rice harvesting and processing. The photo on the left, there are 2 young people who are learning how to harvest wild rice in a traditional way. So by helping the kids to learn the traditions and learn the processes, the elders and the teachers in that community are working to not have the cultural traditions be lost. On the right side, on the photo on the right side, you'll see a Leech Lake elder. His name is Gilbert Moose, and he's teaching a student one of the steps in wild rice processing, and this step is called winnowing. In the website, if you visit the website, you can learn more about all of the steps of the wild rice processing and a little bit more about the ways that Leech Lake is working to protect and preserve their cultural traditions in that way.
And this is Jonathan. I just wanted to jump in. We've had some interesting comments come in that I just wanted to share with both of you. One is a comment from Tim, who's joining us, who said that what he's enjoying about what he's hearing so far, by the way, is that one way to confront or to eliminate stereotypes is to show American Indians as contemporary people working on solving problems that are affecting their communities, that there's no need to dispel stereotypes when you're just showing Native people as they live today. Just wondering if you have a thought on that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good comment. You know, we get millions of visitors here in our museum from all around the world. And, you know, people just often don't know a lot about American Indians. And it's not through any fault of their own. It's just that they haven't had the exposure or the education. And so one of our efforts here is to show Native American people as people who have unique cultures and, you know, important histories, but just as important that they are living, thriving, contemporary people who live in the modern world and, you know, but who still want to strive to keep their cultures alive. And so that's really one of the focuses of our museum, and that's something that we've tried to carry over in this website as well. Do you agree, Jenny?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that one of the things that is just an unfortunate reality is, as talking about, is, you know, sometimes people just aren't aware that there are differences in American Indian cultures from one to the next. And so it is important for us to make sure that, you know, we are conveying people just as they are and doing what they do every day, and in a hope that the people who are using our website or visiting our museum will see that we aren't all exactly the same, that we are different. We have distinct languages and traditions, and we don't all look the same. So, you know, it's a many-layered goal, but I think that was a good point that Tim brought up. So it's much appreciated.
It is appreciated, and we should also mention that we're both American Indian people and tribal members. I'm from the Muscogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma.
And I'm a member of the Osage Nation, also of Oklahoma.
And by the way, I just wanted to mention Tim's follow-up point or question, which is just worth mentioning at this moment as well, which was thinking about expanding these kinds of programs in the future so that Native students are communicating directly with non-Native students around the country and the world.
Right, and we will, as we get towards the end of our PowerPoint, we will be able to address that question a little bit better. We do have a component of our website that we will talk about that will help to communicate more directly from, you know, students from one part of the country all the way to another. So
Great.
We will get there.
Excellent. Thank you both.
Sure. So I want to move on. One of the other challenges that our communities are facing is that, and obviously this seems kind of a pretty obvious one, but there's a threat to their environment. In the case of the St. Regis Mohawk people who live in Akwesasne in upstate New York and in Canada, their community is where the border of the United States and Canada crosses at the St. Regis River. Their environment is being threatened by something called the emerald ash borer, which is this little bug or little beetle that you see here. Excuse me. The emerald ash borer is not actually in Akwesasne right now, but black ash trees, which we talked a little bit about before, are very important to the Mohawk people in that area, and other Iroquois communities as well, and actually many Native communities from throughout the northeastern part of the United States. Black ash trees do grow in a large portion of the United States and Canada, and the emerald ash borer is actually infested areas all around Akwesasne. It has not yet reached there. So one of the ways that they're having to deal with this is looking at 21st century scientific knowledge, and by studying the emerald ash borer in other places, they're able to find ways to help to protect their own environment. What you're seeing right now is one of the interactives from our website, and this is about the emerald ash borer life cycle. And so by having scientists and environmentalists and ecologists who can study the trees and people who can study the insects, they can learn a little bit more about what makes this little beetle tick and the way that it works and what it does to actually harm the trees and damage the trees. So by understanding the life cycle of this emerald ash borer, people are better able to understand the ways that they can address the problem and they can help the trees. If we could jump back over to the PowerPoint, I'll show you, there's a photograph of one of the strategies that they use is to by employing 21st century scientific knowledge. They know the way that the emerald ash borer harms the trees. It basically lays its eggs in the tree, and the larvae feast on the inner bark of the tree, which basically girdles the tree and kills it. So one way that they're working to protect the trees is by injecting them with something called triazine, which is a very non-harmful to humans sort of insecticide. It's basically like a dish soap. And what it does is it makes the tree distasteful to the bug so that it won't eat the tree. And that therefore solves the problem of the bug getting into the tree. So many of you might have heard about the damage to black ash trees and other trees, about moving firewood and things like that. This is the way that they're working for that challenge. I'm going to move on to one of our next challenges, and I'm going to let Ed talk a little bit about these next two specific challenges. So Ed, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, and you can probably tell from this slide that we've changed environments now. Again, we're back down in what's now southwestern California, where the Kumeyaay people have lived for thousands of years. They're still there today. This is a very dry environment, as I mentioned before. But what most people don't realize about the Kumeyaay is that they actually managed their environment long before Europeans arrived. They had specialists in their communities who are known as Kwasiai. And these people, these Kwasiai, were responsible for sort of managing the environment, giving advice to the people about things like planting, growing, and cultivation of certain plants, controlled burning. And burning, we know, when it's controlled, is a very effective way to keep an environment healthy. And for even forest management. Another thing that they did is water and erosion management. So again, mentioning that this was a really dry environment, and water is very important. Now, when the Spanish soldiers and missionaries and settlers arrived in the late 1700s, 1769, the Kumeyaay way of living began to change. Their traditional ways of living, their land management practices, and even the environment was disrupted by the Spanish arrival and then the subsequent settlers, the Mexican and American settlers who came to that area. So the Kumeyaay environment began to change. I'm going to show you one of the features on our website now that will illustrate what happens to this environment. This is again one of our interactives. It helps to reinforce some of the messages that students are hearing in the videos. When we look at this illustration here, we see that cattle were introduced by the Spanish and the Americans who came to the area. Cattle eat the grasses and the small plants more quickly than they can recover. As plant life disappears from the wetlands, so does water. When heavy rains come down, it erodes the land and carves out an opening. Some of the settlers in the area even drained the wetlands to make more room for their crops and for livestock. Settlers even cut down trees for building material and to make more room for cattle. So these are all the things that contributed to the erosion and loss of water in this environment. So when the Campo-Kumeyaay Nation began to address the loss of water on their reservation, they turned back to some of their traditional knowledge and their knowledge of land management techniques. They combined those with modern science and to fix the problem. So this illustration kind of shows the process that they undertook. First of all, you cover the eroded stream bed with a heavy layer of plastic. This helps to keep the water from seeping down and further into the earth. They dump large rocks into this empty stream bed. Now, this was the traditional technique that the Kwasiai used for thousands of years to keep water from eroding away. Simply just dropping these stones into a creek bed. It helped to slow the water up. It helped to keep the soil from eroding away. And then they planted trees, different kinds of plants and trees to restore plant life. Again, this helps to slow the erosion and to keep water in the area. And finally, you have a restored wetlands. So if we can go back to the PowerPoint, you see before and after pictures of an environment that was severely denuded, severely eroded, and after the work that the Kumeyaay, the Campo Environmental Protection Agency, they have their own EPA, did to restore this wetland, they raised the water table by almost 20 feet, which is really a remarkable achievement. So that's a combination of traditional knowledge and skills and 21st century science and reclamation of a very important resource, water. Now the next one that we'd like to talk about, again, we're going to move environments. We're back up in the Northwest. Salmon have been a part of Lummi culture for thousands of years, but it's much more than just a traditional food. Salmon are part of Lummi identity, and indeed, sometimes Lummis refer to themselves as salmon people. Salmon are viewed as a gift that's to be respected and taken care of. They even have stories in their language that talk about the origin of salmon. But now, salmon are in trouble, and many of you probably know that salmon have a complex life cycle. They are a migratory animal. They're spawned or given birth to in little streams far up in river systems. And when they're old enough, they travel down these rivers to the ocean where they live until they're mature. Then they migrate eventually back to the same river where they were born and travel back up to spawn and give birth to new salmon in the same place. Isn't that remarkable? So I'd like to ask a question. Anybody out there have a guess? How far can a salmon travel during its lifetime? So if you have thoughts about that, you want to post an answer on the chat board, please do.
That's a great question. So how far can so we're asking how far a salmon can travel in its lifetime?
Yeah.
All right. Connie's the first person in with a response. Let's see what some others have to say. Others are coming in. Catherine is going for 5 times as far as Connie's 1,000 kilometers. What do some other people think? Is anybody close so far?
Does that mean you want me to give the answer?
No, not yet. We're just looking for hints.
I think we're getting some good answers. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. 2,000 to 3,000 miles from looks like Quane Andrews from Brooklyn. 3,000 miles from Portland, Oregon. So these are actually very accurate, and I think it depends on which species of salmon and which waters we're talking about. But in the case of these northwest salmon that the Lummi are working with, some of these salmon migrate as far as 2,500 miles and then migrate back again. So that's a 5,000-mile journey. And that doesn't account for all the swimming around that they do in the meantime while they're in one place. So it's a long way. It's a really remarkable life cycle. So given this life cycle and the range of habitat, helping salmon is really a complex job. The salmon are affected by overharvesting, overfishing, development, pollution from agriculture and industry, and other forms of habitat destruction. It's really a much bigger job than just one American Indian tribe or group of people can do on their own. And that's why the Lummis partner with many other groups and organizations to help the salmon in their area. The Lummis actually have their own Department of Natural Resources that works on many environmental issues, including salmon restoration. This interactive from our website shows just a sampling of the projects that the Lummi are doing. You see that there's a variety of types of projects to help salmon. There are hatcheries where they grow small fish to be released into the habitat. There are riparian projects. And let's say maybe you don't know what riparian means. We try to have keyword glossaries and other kinds of clues that will come up here and give you information about specific kinds of words that students may not know. So riparian projects add new trees and plants back to the river banks to cool the water, control erosion. Slope stabilization is also very important. Projects that replace bad road construction and that control soil erosion in areas where there's been a lot of logging taking place. And in-stream projects are projects in the water itself or on the banks that help to restore the river habitat, log jams, boulders, and gravel, things that have been taken out of the environment over the years. Now this interactive shows just a few of the projects that the Lummi Nation has been involved in for about 20 years now. You see here this darkened green area. This is the Lummi Reservation in Washington State today. Some of the projects are actually on the reservation itself. But notice that way up the river itself, way up into the higher reaches of the river, the Lummi are also involved off their reservation lands in specific kinds of projects to help the salmon. It takes many partners. It takes groups and organizations that are also interested in saving salmon. So this second part of the diagram shows a number of the other kinds of projects that other people are involved in. Different American Indian tribes, state, local, and federal agencies, environmental groups, farmers, other kinds of people who are really involved to try to protect this resource. So partnerships is another important way that American Indians are dealing with environmental issues. Pass it back to Genevieve.
Oh, thanks. So as we jump back to our PowerPoint, we've tried to give you a sense of 4 of the specific challenges that these 4 communities are facing, and in many instances, although we gave examples from one community, these aren't necessarily specific to that community only. So, as Ed's talking about the salmon and the loss of traditional foods, that also rings true for Leech Lake as well. As we move forward, I want to just quickly, I know we're sort of nearing the end of our time, and we had the question earlier about how we can share these stories. And one of the aspects of our website, there's a whole component for teachers on our website with some lesson plan ideas and some ways to use the website with students. But one of our goals is to help people share their own stories. So to think about how does this impact you and your community? Is salmon restoration, the salmon recovery projects or the wetlands restoration something that's relevant to you, or are there other environmental problems and issues that your community is facing? And so we can have students, we ask students to do their own story project that they can then post on this website so that other kids from around the country can learn about the specific projects and things that are happening in other parts of the world, in other parts of the country or the world even for that case. If we could look at the website again just very quickly, we can show you what this page looks like, and we have a PowerPoint template there that students can use and pull images from our website, and they can pull quotes and things and develop it themselves and share it with not only their own community but with other people who are viewing the website as well. I wanted just quickly, I noticed some of the quotes, some of the questions or the comments that were coming up were talking about what kids learn in the classroom, and I was pleased to see those comments coming up, and I think that we want to leave, we have one more video clip that we'd like to end with, but I also want to just leave with the thought that this website, one of the main thoughts behind the way we develop this and why we do what we do in the education office here at the National Museum of the American Indian is to really try to get quality, relevant, contemporary content about American Indians into the classroom so that kids can learn about American Indian peoples and tribes and cultures in ways that don't always put American Indians in the past, and that goes a little bit beyond food, clothing, and shelter and helps them to look at and understand that, as Ed was mentioning earlier, that our cultures are living, thriving, very vibrant cultures, contemporary cultures today. So if we could jump back to the PowerPoint, we can sort of end up our presentation here. We, as I mentioned, had one last question that we wanted to throw out there, and I'll throw it back to Ed to finish this up here, and then I guess if we have other questions, I might jump back in, but I'll pass it over to Ed.
Thanks, Genevieve. So our last question, I guess, is for everybody to consider, what does it mean to honor the land? What does it mean for you? And I think we've learned that the environment is our responsibility. Each and every one of us has to take some role in ensuring the well-being of our environment. And we need that healthy environment to support us, just as it always has done. So we would like to leave you with a message from one of the elders from the Lummi Nation in Washington State. His name is James Hilaire. So if we can run that clip, we will finish with that. And if we have time for some more questions afterwards, we'll come back.
Great, Ed. We're going to play that clip right now. And as we do, I want people to go ahead and use the chat area and try to answer this question about what it means to honor.
For young people that are growing up in this nation, great nation of ours, that I hope that they grow up and learn to be responsible citizens, responsible by taking care of the environment in which gives us our very breath of life. Clean air, clean water, clean oceans, clean lakes. We need to clean up our act as human beings. We need to do our part in order to have these beautiful animals and for the future.
Great. That's quite a clip to finish our discussion on, Ed and Genevieve, and we're getting some wonderful responses here from Amy and Cheryl and others about what it means to them. Cheryl says to preserve, protect, and cherish. For Amy, it means honoring the land, and it means recognizing that I have an impact on the land and that I can work to protect rather than harm the earth. We're also seeing Kwame is saying that you respect the fact that we are our environment. When we harm the environment, we're harming ourselves and shortchanging our children. And these are really great responses. Well, I invite you to share some final thoughts. I also wanted to bring up Dan's wonderful drawing capturing these different approaches to dealing with current environmental challenges that you've talked about today, and also capturing some of the thoughts that our participants have been sharing. So, Genevieve Annette, any final thoughts?
Well, I really love the responses that people are putting up about the environment. The way that we can affect is to teach young people, teach children, and you teach by modeling, and you teach by living, and teaching a sense of responsibility. That's what's going on in these Native communities that we've tried to highlight. It doesn't make it easy, does it? I mean, it's a difficult thing. I just wanted to mention too, our last PowerPoint slide has the website address. We want to remind you that it's not live yet. We do anticipate within a couple of weeks, by August 1st. They're just ironing out a few of the technical issues, and it'll be ready to go. We really hope that people will visit it and use it in the classrooms. And Jenny, you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just echo what Ed said, and it's definitely encourage everyone to visit our website when it does go live in a few weeks. And I want to convey some of the messages that the communities that we worked with left us with as we kind of ended our work with them over the past months, and that was how important all of this is to them. And it's not only about educating their own community about what they're doing, but also educating the broader population. So it's really important that people learn about these things and understand the many, many years, in some cases decades worth of work that has gone into addressing these environmental challenges that these 4 communities are facing, and that they definitely are continuing the work and hoping to help educate others as to how they can do similar type of positive change for the environments where they live. So just leave everyone with that note, and we, again, really appreciate being asked to participate in this conference, and we very much enjoyed being a part of it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that you were a part of this conference. It's such a, I think, a great way to kick off the 3 discussions we have today about stories, real-time stories about what's about how people are valuing the land, and we really appreciate it. I did want to let people know and remind people that we would love your feedback, and I know a lot of people are giving us their feedback in the chat. We'd also like it in the form of the evaluation. We've put a link up at the top left corner of the screen, and we really take your feedback and try to improve every subsequent session that we do. So it's very important to us, and we do appreciate your time. Don't forget, there's a lot of ways to connect. We've got, of course, the teacher's guide that's been referenced. There's also the ability to contribute on the Partners in Learning Network and on the Taking It Global site, where you can join the dialogue. And of course, facebook.com/shoutlearning and twitter.com/shoutlearning are both places to stay in touch with the project. There's a new tour on the Shout Global Classroom that walks you through how it works, and we encourage you to check that out. We've got that link right here on the top of this slide. And don't forget, 1 hour from now, we'll be on with our next session. And our next session is about community narratives. And we'll be joined by James, Alex, and Josh, who represent different parts of the Smithsonian and have some very different experiences they bring to the table. But this is another form of a citizen involvement project, where we're going to talk about how ordinary people like you and me could go ahead and record history right where we live, and you're really going to enjoy that session. So I hope you'll tune back in 1 hour. You can stay right where you are. You don't need to leave the room. We'll be back in an hour, and I'm going to leave up the great illustration that Dan has been drawing throughout the session today, which of course will be posted to the Shout site after today's conference. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it.